There it is. All right. Welcome, everybody. It is Hump Day. It's beautiful Wednesday. Today's guest is going to talk about my favorite topic, my superpower, authenticity. So tune in. This will be fun.
Practicing Polyamory. Real-life perspectives from the imperfect people of polyamory. The mission of the Practicing Polyamory podcast is to provide a platform for all of the real-life, flawed humans that practice polyamory so that we might all learn from one another and grow as a community. Enjoy the show.
All right. Welcome, everybody, to the show. Just before we jump in, as always, I want to thank everybody who's subscribed on YouTube. You can find us now on youtube.com/practicingpoly. You can also find us at Practicing Poly on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, Twitch, all that social media stuff. And if you're listening to us on iTunes, Spotify, Stitcher, or any other podcast app, would really love if you could please subscribe and leave a review wherever it is that you download. That would really help us out, help us show up higher on those search results. And as always, I want to remind each of you, if you are listening to this podcast, you are a welcome guest to be on the show. If you are actively polyamorous, polyam curious, or a professional serving the polyamorous community, we want to hear your story. Whether you're disabled, BIPOC, pan, bi, demi, gay, straight, sex worker, kinkster, queer, lesbian, trans, NB, arrow, ace, whatever it is, we want to hear your story. The more stories we hear, the more the world learns about us, the more representation we have, the better we can serve our community. All right, that is my daily spiel. And now, ladies and gentlemen, let's get on with the show. Oh, and ladies and gentlemen, especially important today on International Trans Awareness Day. So, celebration to all of you. We see you. We love you. All right, that's it. Let's get on with the show. We are, all of us, conditioned by parents, schools, families, religions, and culture that some parts of ourselves are acceptable and others are not. Our guest today believes that we need to fully accept who we are and break free of social and religious conditioning, allowing ourselves to be who we are and not who we're told to be. His work is to help you feel safe and supported so that old patterns and habits that no longer serve you can be released, trauma can be healed, and awareness can be grown. And while self-acceptance is the core of his approach, empowerment is the goal. For our guest, the model is this. When we don't accept parts of ourselves, we hide it from others, and this stops us from experiencing the deepest levels of intimacy. Now, I always say that my authenticity is my superpower, so I cannot wait to dive deeper into that secret with today's guest. Joining us today out of San Francisco, California, welcome to the show, Sebastian Earl. Sebastian, welcome. The show. Thank you so much for joining me today.
You're welcome. Thank you for inviting me, and that was a great intro. I really enjoyed that. Thank you.
Oh, thank you. I joke on my brother's podcast. It's my one skill. It's the one thing that I'm good at. I can write an intro for people. But thank you, of course, for hanging out with me today. Let's start with a little bit about yourself, your journey through the polyamorous community, and what got you to the point where you realize, authenticity really is the core of your practice. How did that journey go?
Well, I spent my 20s playing in a sort of semi-successful rock band back in England, where I grew up in London. But when the band I was in broke up, I decided I wanted to just travel around the world and try to figure out what I really wanted to do with my life. And I decided I wanted to do sort of spiritually orientated psychotherapy, and came to a wonderful school here in San Francisco called the California Institute of Integral Studies. I started therapy. I started training to be a therapist from a very sort of naive point of view of thinking I was a jolly nice chap who sort of wanted to help people. And the further into the course I got and the more into my own therapy I got, I realized, I've really got a lot of issues and I'm pretty screwed up in my life. Trying to find a way to heal myself. And I got really passionate about that. I'm really passionate about finding out what really works to help people sort of become whole and healthy and happy. And as I did that work myself, what I came to discover is that for me, as you were saying earlier, the more we can really fully be ourselves, the more we can kind of, like you said, let go of our conditioning and our programming that we come out of in childhood and really give ourselves permission to kind of find our own authenticity, then that is my experience with what allows us to be really sort of healthy and happy and really enjoy and get the fullness out of our lives.
I 100% agree with that. I'm finding it more and more for myself as I kind of get through life. Just for whatever reason, like especially the past couple of months or so, that I've really been coming into my own authenticity, and part of it is this podcast. Part of it is being able to just be here, be in front of people, and like, this is me.
Fine. I'll do it myself.
I do it myself, you know. This is just who I am, and it doesn't matter whether you're talking to me on the phone before the podcast, or you're talking to me in the insurance space. I also sell insurance, or we're friends, or whatever it is. Like, this is what you get the whole way through. There was a couple of things that you mentioned here as you were telling me about your journey. The first one was that you wanted to do spiritual therapy. Is that different from any other kind of therapy? Can you kind of give me a little bit more insight of what you mean by spiritual therapy?
Well, I mean, what I do now is what I call holistic therapy. So it's actually a combination of mind, body, and spirit. And, I mean, the more traditional therapy is kind of Freudian based, which is sort of more the kind of I call Freud the granddaddy of the mind. And then Carl Jung came along and he sort of developed a more spiritually orientated therapy, sort of understanding that there is, that we do have a spiritual aspect to our being. And then by spiritual, I don't mean religious. To me, I think a lot of religions are a perversion of spirituality. I mean, certainly not all of them, but a lot of them can be. The least famous of the sort of granddaddies of therapy is a guy called Willem Reich. And he came along and really focused on the body and understanding that, the body is something that is also incredibly important, that there's a sort of combination of all of those three things. And if I kind of throw the religious aspect in there again, I would say that, there's a lot of sort of, if you think of Christianity and Judaism and Islam in particular, they've kind of done this splitting of sort of good and bad, God and the devil, and that the body in particular is seen as something, that's a tool of the devil. And to me, that's all absolutely nonsense and also very damaging to people's psyches. So there's a way for me, the understanding that we should allow ourselves to be able to inhabit our bodies and celebrate our bodies. And break free of the idea. I mean, there's so much conditioning in our culture around this idea that the only healthy relationship is a monogamous relationship within marriage, with only a certain parameters around sexuality and what's acceptable in sexuality. And as I sort of, was on my own journey of learning to break free of all of that kind of stuff, I became a member of a really wonderful community here in the Bay Area called Bay Area Open Minds, which is a sort of psychotherapy and healers collective. Because even in the general therapy community in this country and around the world, there's still a lot of judgment and a lot of sort of non-acceptance of not just polyamory, but any kind of alternative sexuality like kink or, even homosexuality or just anything that doesn't fit within these kind of very narrow parameters of what's considered acceptable, if you see what I mean.
Absolutely.
What Bay Area Open Minds is all about is giving people permission to know that they can find therapists out there who are going to be open-minded and accepting of alternative lifestyles around sexuality, polyamory just being one of those alternative lifestyles.
Sure. Is Bay Area Open Minds? Is that what it was? Bay Area Open Minds?
Yeah.
Is it a group of therapists? Is it available as a resource for anybody that needs help?
Absolutely. If you just Google Bay Area Open Minds, you'll find a website with a whole list of different practitioners on there, all of whom have signed up. I mean, it's a voluntary. You just sign up if you want to sign up, and put yourself on the list. If you want to put yourself on the list, to just say that I'm somebody who's going to be non-judgmental and accepting of your alternative kind of sexual lifestyle, and not be judgmental or see that as some kind of a pathology in a way that a lot of other therapists might do.
Very cool. And right now, since we're all doing basically telehealth, and since it's Bay Area specific, Is it specific to California, and once it's in person to the Bay Area?
Yes, it is. It is, but it's a community that has a lot of resources connected to other parts of the country. So, I mean, if people are in other parts of the country and they could still go there and post something on there about what they're looking for, and almost certainly somebody would be able to help them find that, not just in the Bay Area or California, but pretty much anywhere in the USA or even potentially the world.
Perfect. Well, thank you for that resource. Hopefully it helps some people out there. Now, one of the things that came to mind as you were talking about guilt and structures of religion and all this stuff is really, I'll share my personal story of what turned me off to religion. One of the many bouts that I've had with religion. I grew up in a Seventh-day Adventist household. You know, we were pretty strict, going to church on Saturdays. You know, I wasn't allowed to watch Saturday morning cartoons because we were getting ready for church, you know, and all this stuff. And there are, as you mentioned, a lot of rules. You said, you know, the body is the devil's playground or whatever it is. You know, we were taught, you know, the body is a temple, and so we have to eat a certain way and keep our minds and bodies free of certain things. So I remember during my first deployment, I think it was during my first deployment back in 2006, that would have been. I was reading the Bible a lot and like trying to center myself on, you know, that thing that I grew up on. And so I remember, you know, I didn't want to curse, right? Because that's a sin. And I didn't want to watch porn and jerk off because that's a sin. And I tried not to drink because I grew up believing that, you know, that's a sin. So like,
oh, hell no.
Yeah, right? So like I really put these restrictions on myself, and whenever I failed, right, because inevitably I would, you know, I was just really, really hard on myself. And now, you know, I do all of those things when I want to, or when I don't want to, I don't do them. It's more authentic. But, you know, I've really dropped religion altogether. Is there, and how can people find a happy medium? Because I don't think that everybody necessarily just wants to get rid of their religion if they grew up, you know, believing that way. But it's hard sometimes to reconcile the teachings that we were brought up with and who we believe our authentic selves to be. So how can people marry those two?
I think that's a great question. I mean, I think there are positive aspects to religion. I mean, community, I think, is something that a lot of people, there's a huge lack of community often in our modern culture. And I think that's something that where sort of, you know, religions and churches have something really valuable to offer. But what I would say is it's, you know, giving ourselves permission to do it on our terms rather than believing, you know, that you know, all the teachings are, you know, really genuinely come from God, rather than just seeing them as you know, a good set of values that we can choose to live by, without this idea that somehow we're going to be cursed or sent to hell, you know, if we don't abide by them. So yeah, I mean, you know, so I think there is a way that, and look, to me, that, you know, there are religions out there who kind of have more of that philosophy that you know, this is just one way of sort of approaching the divine energy in the universe, which I actually, you know, do believe there is a divine energy in the universe, rather than the ones who say we are the way and we're, you know, everybody else is wrong, and if you're not the way, you don't do what we say, you're going to go to hell. And that to me is like really, really damaging to the psyche, because, you know, there are certain aspects of our basic humanity that to me is like, you know, biological, can come out of, you know, just who we are as human beings. And when we keep giving these messages that our essential humanity is wrong or sinful or evil in some way, I just think that's deeply, deeply damaging to people's psyches.
That's not how it works. That's not how any of this works.
and we do get a lot of that, you know. I remember reading there was a meme or something like that where you know, religion Christianity, I guess, it tends to teach us that we are not worthy, that we are, sinful and as dirty rags, or I forget exactly how the scripture is, but like we're basically we're dirty rags, and we have to come to the throne or come to the cross to be washed and be purified. And I mean, you mentioned that you start with that. You say that kind of belief is damaging.
Absolutely. I mean, my experience is that it stops us from actually being fully ourselves. And what we want to do is to allow ourselves to be ourselves. And the more we're taught things that say, oh, we have to hide parts of ourselves, or that certain parts of ourselves are not acceptable, then we're going to push those parts underground into the unconscious. And that, in my opinion, is when we will go unconscious around parts of ourselves, that's when they kind of get dark and twisted. I mean, I think that's why you find so many sort of, right-wing Christians are the people like doing meth with a gay guy in a motel room, because they're repressing stuff down, and when it's underneath, that's where the real damage can get done, and then it can come out in sort of dark and ugly ways. And that's part of why I'm so sort of passionate about saying the more we can really be truly authentic, the less we're going to have those kind of twisted parts of ourselves. And I think there's an irony. I mean, I don't know if people are familiar with the website FetLife, but FetLife is sort of like the online community for the kink and poly people in the world. It's kind of like a Facebook for the kink and poly people.
Right.
And I think a lot of people would imagine that there is certainly some darkness to be found on FetLife, but I would argue people who are on there are much less likely to be doing any acting out and dark and terrible things around sexuality, because they're actually conscious and open and finding healthy ways to express these parts of themselves. Which is counterintuitive for a lot of people who kind of grow up in this culture that we have to behave in certain ways. But actually finding open and healthy ways to express all parts of ourselves is what leads to you being much less likely to do something damaging in the world.
Yeah.
If that makes sense,
Yeah, no, it absolutely does. Places like FetLife do give us, and a lot of Facebook groups as well, for our specific communities, give us that platform where we can share these things, we can be our authentic selves, and that's absolutely liberating. But speaking of which, there are a lot of people who are unable to be their true authentic selves in the majority of their lives. People who are not able to come out as polyam at work, or to their families, or all these different things. So that's definitely a big struggle for those folks. How can we help them? How can you help them? How can a therapist, help them to kind of come to terms with where they are, and still find a way to be authentic, even if they can't be out?
Well, I think that's a really great question. And what I would say is, look, there are certain places where we're going to have to put on what Carl Jung would call our persona, where we kind of have to put a mask over our face and turn up in a certain way that's going to be acceptable. I mean, for a lot of people, who work in the corporate world, there's no doubt that that's just a necessity that they need to do when they go off to work in order to be able to survive in that environment. But to me, it's about finding places where we can take that mask off. That's the really important thing. We're not always, I'm very fortunate in that I live a kind of life where I really, I try to minimize anywhere that I have to wear the mask, but most people don't get to be as lucky as I am. And I really recognize that. And to me, it's like finding a community like FetLife, or even just finding a therapist like me, or the other people on the Bay Area Open Minds, where they can start to talk to honestly and openly and really about who they are and what they really want, and then find ways that they can express those parts of themselves, which isn't going to be throughout the whole of their lives. Even within my own family, there's certain ways in which I can't really be fully myself. I have to hold certain parts in just because I know I don't want to upset people. But it's finding as many places as possible where you can genuinely express yourself. And look, I don't just do individual therapy. I run groups. And one of the things I love about group therapy is it's also somewhere where we can kind of practice really being our authentic selves in a safe container so that it becomes easier for us to then kind of take that out into the world. Because there are very few, it's like sportsmen get to practice all the time, but it's like, where do we get to practice kind of doing life, if you see what I mean?
Yeah.
And to me, that's why I'm a huge fan. I'm a group therapy junkie. I did a lot of it for myself personally when I was doing my own training, and I've run groups for many years now, and I find it a really powerful place. And the other thing I just want to talk about here is to bring it back to polyamory, for me, it's not just authenticity, but it's being able to be authentic and open in your communication with your primary partner, being able to be really real with each other about your needs and what you want. I don't believe that it's people having sex with each other that really destroys relationship. Having sex with people outside of their relationship that destroys relationships is dishonesty and the lying and the not being real about what's going on. That's the thing that really is destructive. And I think when if we want to kind of go into something like open relationships or polyamorous relationships, the most vital and important thing is open and honest communication and a willingness to it takes courage. When we've been shamed and told that certain parts of ourselves are not acceptable or sinful or ugly in some way, it takes an awful lot of courage to be able to come out and say, I'm going to share with my partner who I really am. But that to me is where you can really, the juice is really to be found. If you're willing to have the courage to do that work, and learn to have that openness and that honesty and really communicate that with, between partners, then I think, that's where you end up with really, really juicy relationships, as opposed to relationships where people aren't honest with each other. And I think that's where so much unhappiness comes out of, where you just see so many marriages where the people are just so unhappy or even hate each other and still feel obliged to stay together. And there's this alternative out there where you can be yourself, and the juiciness and the love that can come from that is mind-blowing. At least that's been my own experience. That it's blowing my mind just how rich and alive my life can become living by those principles.
So you're telling me there's a chance?
There's a chance, absolutely. We can do it, and that's what a lot of the show is all about, is explaining that over and over and over again and showing people, hey, there is this other path. It's really cool that you have those personal experiences to draw on, and I want to ask you again about maybe one of these personal experiences. You mentioned a couple of times that you had gone through your own therapy as you were being trained to become a therapist, and it changed a lot of your practice and your mentality and your mindset. And it sounds like somewhere in there is when you discovered how important it was to you to be authentic. Can you tell me a little bit about that specific journey? Was there a particular moment, or was it maybe over the course of a couple of years? But just kind of this journey of really discovering, being my authentic self is the thing that's going to change everything. What was that discovery like?
I think it's something that, I look, there's a frighteningly lack of that personal growth work you actually required to do in order to become a licensed therapist in California. I did maybe 20 times more than what the requirement is, because I felt that that's actually what's needed, that you have to really work on your own stuff in order to be able to help other people work on theirs. And for me, it's been a slow and gradual, year over year of getting more and more clear about what I needed to do inside of myself. And I actually, I was in therapy with a guy I would say is a great therapist in many ways, but who did have, I would say, a lot of judgment about my sort of alternative desires around sexuality. And I sort of had to understand that I was being limited by his limitations and get out of therapy with him and into therapy with somebody who was more open and accepting of who I actually wanted to be in order to find that for myself. And I also want to say that I spent many years, struggling to find a relationship where I could sort of live the principles that I was beginning to really believe in. But then literally, it feels like a miracle to me that a few years ago, when I did find a woman who, kind of matched me with the same beliefs and the same ideas about real open, authentic, honest communication, that when we found each other, it was just like bang. I mean, everything I taught and everything I believed in suddenly started to manifest in a really incredible way. And just watching how the abundance has just flowed into both of our lives has been incredibly affirming to me, because for until you're sort of walking the walk, and you can't really necessarily fully believe that this stuff is as powerfully effective as it is. But once you start manifesting it in the way that I feel I've been lucky enough to do in my relationship, then it really has been a mind-blowing experience. And it continues to be so. I mean, after 4 years together, we're still growing, we're still learning, and we're still finding deeper and deeper parts of ourselves that we've been shy or reticent to really show each other, and keep coming forward and coming forward. And I'm sort of in awe of how far we've come, and in awe of sort of seeing how far we can still go if we just continue on this path.
I love that. I mean, I'm over here smiling the whole way through, because I see your passion. I can feel
I gave it a 10. A 10.
Yes, absolutely. You get a 10 on the success of your relationship. It's just wonderful. I can feel the love that you have for your partner, and the excitement that you have for the relationship and where it's going to grow. And it really, I can definitely resonate with that. And I feel that it really does come a lot from being able to have that authenticity, be your true self, be my true self, and really just dig into that. And, that person just appreciates everything about who you are, and you get to live your truth. It's wonderful. It's wonderful. Sebastian, I want to ask you just a couple of more things.
Sure.
First of all, if anybody wants to get in touch with you, if they want to work with you, what is the best way for them to do that?
Well, they can go to my website, which is authentictherapy.com. I love the fact you have it just, running down at the bottom of your screen there. I just want to say I call it authentic therapy, not because the therapy is authentic, but the therapy is focused on being authentic, if that makes sense. And, they can always call my work number too, which is 415-835-2148. Just say 415-835-2148, or email me at sebastian567@hotmail.com. And, I love working with people who want to discover to, be more themselves and be more authentic, and know that they can work with a therapist who's going to be open and accepting of any kind of alternative sexual lifestyles that they might want to live in their lives, or already are living in their lives, and just need help with something else, but they don't want that part of themselves to be judged when they go to a therapist.
Yep. That's the important piece of it, is we don't need to be explaining, our relationship styles to our therapist. They should already understand. Well, thank you. Thank you for sharing that. The very last thing is any final thoughts, anything that I might not have asked, anything that I might have missed, or just, a final word, piece of advice that you would like to leave for the audience.
First, just to say, I love your show. I love what you're doing. I really, support you in it. I think it's wonderful. I really appreciate you inviting me on here. And the last thing, to me, it's all about being real. It's all about allowing ourselves to really be ourselves, and taking that courage to risk, being who we really are, rather than, staying within the confines of all the messages we were taught growing up, and from our religion and our culture about who we should be.
Absolutely. Absolutely. All right, everybody. So that's it. That's the lesson of the day. Be who you are, not who you're told to be. And if you need help discovering that, if you need help getting through to that, definitely give Sebastian a call. Find him at authentictherapy.com. Sebastian, thank you again for spending some time with me today.
You're welcome. Thank you.
And thank you, as always, to our live audience for tuning in today. As a reminder, when we're live, you get no commercial interruptions, but the same cannot be said for those podcast downloads. So if you want to avoid the commercial interruptions, be sure to catch us Monday through Wednesday live at 2:30 Pacific time, or sign up for Patreon, where you get access to our commercial-free RSS feed and support the show. Don't forget to subscribe on YouTube and wherever it is that you download your podcast if you haven't already. And please leave us a review. We'll really appreciate it. All right, everybody, that is all we've got for today. Thank you all so much. And as always,
Have a nice day!
Thank you for tuning in to the Practicing Polyamory podcast. Would you or someone in your polycule like to be a guest? Sign up at practicingpolyamory.com and join the conversation. Please support us by subscribing, liking, and following us on social media at Practicing Polya by clicking any of the affiliate links on our website, or by subscribing at patreon.com/